Well,
That's one thing. I am oddly against e-readers because of that very reason.
as opposed to the page,
I enjoy a good, true book.
the smell of a book.
I enjoy a book as a being.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's your friend. I mean, I have books from when I was a little girl. And I mean, people these days won't go, "Oh, it's my childhood Kindle." I mean, you know, they won't do that.
My childhood Kindle. Sounds like a... Oh, I want to ask you this, though, because it seems like you can really jump between writing a novel or short story, a narrative that's of that, versus a play, which is it's a whole other kind of thing.
Yep.
And how spare a playwright are you? And your pages spare, like say somebody like Sarah Rule. It's like a poem almost when you see her pages.
Well, it depends on the style of the play. I mean, my first little musical, The Soul Mirror, it was very poetic, but something like Quadrille, I just wrote regular dialogue.
And you don't, you're not overly defining characters or movement or things to do because you know the actor is going to figure out a lot of that on its own.
Yes, in fact, I had to pare down a lot of my weird parenthetical stage directions when I first wrote Quadrille, because I said, okay, if the dialogue doesn't tell the story, then it's not a well-told story. So I axed all of the stage direction. Yeah, and it worked.
And just go straight to the necessary action the actor has to do to go from A to Z.
I let the actors tell the story instead of me trying to tell them how to tell the story.
How do you approach scene structure and the overall structure of a play? Do you pretty much beginning to end? You kind of just, because you are organic when you start. You're not working from an outline, but you get to a point where you have some sense of where this is aimed and how the hero is going to land?
I always have an idea where it's going to land. It's just the erratic flight to the end.
Yes, okay.
And sometimes I write it completely out of sequence.
Okay.
And see where it fits, or if it fits at all.
Oh, that's a good trick. Do you think that you're plot minded? Do you really heavily not Agatha Christie so much, but how do you feel about plot as you approach the work? How much of your plot surprises you in the writing?
Oh, sometimes it surprises me. I mean, sometimes the characters surprise me. I mean, there was one point where I was writing a story and I set it down for a while in order to write the second part of the story. And when I got back to the first part of the story, I realized, wait a minute, when did this character start wearing spectacles? I guess he just needed them over the time when I was writing part two. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, characters do change in spite of you.
Yes, and how comfortable do you feel with how many characters in a scene?
Oh, it depends on if it's a group scene. Yeah, it can be a group scene. It could be a scene between two people.
No, but I mean, in the upper limit of handling an amount of people on stage in a scene progressing forward. How unwieldy can you get with that in terms of numbers of people? I guess that's almost approaching maybe farce, where there's a lot of in and out action and quick things going between people, and as opposed to two characters sitting down and really digging deep into some idea or something.
I don't think I've ever written a scene with a lot of people in it. Like
you've not tried to write a farce.
No, I don't think I have the skill to write a farce.
Yeah, and I've thought about doing that before, and I think, and I've talked to Randy Unger about this. It's almost you have to start with a choreography plan.
Oh yes, you have to map out everything.
as the beginning, because the ins and outs of all of it. And,
Oh yeah, the first time that I realized I needed to map out anything was when I wrote, of all things, a secret pal gift for a musical I was doing. I don't really think I tailored this story to the person. I just wrote the story. But I realized that a particular scene involved like 3 levels of this house. And what one person was doing up there directly related to what was happening down there.
Boy.
Because sounds were heard and people reacted and things. So I actually had to storyboard this, like what was happening in the attic, the first floor, and the basement, because everything.
Now that was a play?
No, that was a short story.
Okay.
I had to figure out who was doing what where. And as far as, I don't think I could write a farce. That takes skill. Just like poetry. I couldn't write poetry.
And
I don't trust
a
my
person
voice.
who writes farces ends up writing a lot of them, then. Right, because they figure the trick out and keep doing it.
Yes, exactly. I mean, farces are fun to do.
Yeah.
Absolutely fun.
What's
And
one of your favorite ones that you've been in?
probably Bullshot Crummond. Bullshot Crummond is hysterical.
And that was this recent one, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Like within the last couple of years?
Yeah, I've actually done Bullshot Crummond of all things about 3 times.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the first one I was Rosemary Fenton, and the next I was Lenya von Bruno. Not at the same time, but I was actually Rosemary Fenton at BOTTG, and David Roster, Joel Roster's father, directed it, and he was a master. That's all I'll have to say.
That's Benicia.
Yes, and that was absolutely. In fact, I remember I had actually gone to audition for the role of Lenya von Bruno, but he asked me to read for Rosemary, and when he offered me the role of Rosemary, I went, but I don't look like, a dainty English rose. And he said, that's all right, we can have a chubby Rosemary. And I said, thank you. But it was absolutely fun.
Well, how was it staged in that house? Because that can be, they can configure it in many ways, right?
Yes, this was done completely on the stage.
Okay.
And I...
Just as a proscenium show, pretty much.
Yep, and I got to work with Matt Davis, I got to work with John Blitt, I mean, all the amazing, amazing people, so...
The theater world is so vast and hard to fathom. I think for most people, even if they go to shows, and the people who dedicate themselves to community theater, let's just say Diane McRice, I think off the top of my head. I mean, she's behind the counter, she's building the sets, she's not on stage, her husband might be, but people like that, and we can just sit here and name them for days, right? You could name more than I do because you've had more association with it. And all of them have day jobs and slug away with bills and everything they have to do to make this way of living that most everybody who's doing it says, well, I'm not going to end up off of Broadway somewhere up there with those big names and lights. I'm just not even anywhere near that, and those people are so far gone.
You do it because you get to do it. I mean, there's always the crop of young theater kids who are bound for Broadway. They're the kids that you will see on the Tonys like, oh, I remember so-and-so.
That guy was on Glee.
And that is their destiny. I mean, but truly, we get to do amazing plays here. We get to do these characters. And yes, they're not Broadway stages, but they're no less.
They're more, in a way, in that there's an intimacy with the audience that you can't get on Broadway. Isn't that true?
Yep. And
they're people you know.
Yep. and you get to,
In the audience.
I mean, you get to perform. I mean, sometimes I'm backstage and it just hits me like, oh my gosh, how lucky I am to be doing this.
And you were a little girl doing that, just like a lot of little girls do when they're young, mimicking and having plays and telling stories.
I was
Going on and
annoying,
on.
yes.
You were annoying.
Well, I mean, I started out, actually I started out with a horrible stutter.
Really?
Yes, I couldn't say two words together without banging my fist against something or like stomping my foot. It was awful. In fact, it was my mother who listened to me read books, because speech therapy, you had to read things and sound them out slowly. So while she was cooking dinner, I sat in the kitchen and read to her. Probably annoyed the heck out of her. But that's where I got my way of speaking.
And you solved the stutter on your own?
I guess I did.
Or you're not stuttering now?
No, sometimes I forget I'm stuttering until someone goes, say, didn't you used to stutter? I go, you're right, I did.
We were talking about journalistic writing. You'd be writing journal as opposed to going out and observing like Anna Devere Smith or Dan Hoyle's type theater, where they become the characters they talk to on stage, and how powerful that is in terms of how they do it as a solo performer. They can keep all of his voices separate and distinct. I don't know if this is forming a question or it's just a
I'm curious,
discussion.
yeah.
That voices in the head, some people can't deal with it and they end up in institutions, right? I mean, or
on stage,
or on the street. You know, they're not creatively using it. They're on the street and getting in trouble for it, or not on their meds or whatever it is that causes that issue with them of not being able to channel the voices in their head into story. And I think it's very curious that out of trying to work on your stutter, you got to story almost in your life, did you not?
Interesting. I don't know
because you were sitting there reading these stories.
Oh, yeah.
Usually the kid gets read to, but now you flipped. You're reading because mom doesn't want you to stutter. So then you're internalizing story in a way, in terms of being the story reader, the story runner.
It was. I mean, I never stutter when I'm on stage or when I sing. I don't know why, but that's just. Some people say, oh, it's because you're in characters. Like, no, I don't know why. Maybe it's a switch flipped in my head. I don't know. But I mean, it's been quite some time since I've considered myself a stutterer. In fact, the last time I did was, I was actually interviewed when I did a production of I Do in Lafayette. And this woman called me up and she wanted to interview me. And I thought, oh, this is wonderful. This is about the play. And she kept like going back to stuttering. And I kept trying to move away from stuttering. And I finally said, I don't really want to talk about my stuttering because that's not who I am. And she said, well, that's too bad because this is about your stutter. And I went, well then, I would like to stop the interview. I don't want you to publish this. I withdraw my consent. And she said, okay, and she hung up.
Whoa.
And although she wasn't really honest. And I actually, in searching, because everyone Googles their name sometimes, I Googled my name and I found out that she had published the article.
Oh.
And I read it and went, wow, this is exactly what I did not want everyone to read about me.
Well, it's curious, isn't it, that everybody, it's such a strange world in terms of communication. We were talking about this at lunch, the idea of what's the next evolution of communication? A phone in your shoe, because there's just has to be a new way to kind of communicate with somebody.
Uh-oh.
Notice how I'm using cards.
I do.
Does this remind you of anybody? Okay, well, I'll remind you.
Okay.
This is James Lipton style from the inside the actor's studio. And what is your favorite word?
My favorite word?
Yes.
I've always liked nevertheless.
Ooh. What's your least favorite word?
Moist.
Okay.
I hate that word.
What turns you on?
Being in the writing groove, sitting at my desk with my cup of coffee, and just knowing that I'm working on something amazing. Because when I'm at that desk, I know I shouldn't be anywhere else.
And that beats being on stage.
Sometimes.
Okay. All right.
It's kind of on a par.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. No, I can understand your answer very well on that. Okay. What turns you off?
Being stuck at work for 8 hours when all I want to do is sit home and write.
Okay.
Of
You are doing all of what you've done with while still occupied with a day job.
Yeah.
So, what sound do you love?
What sound do I love? Are you talking music or anything?
Any sound, yes.
Any sound. I love and it's a sound that I discovered by accident. I was looking for sort of a meditation frequency on YouTube to go to sleep by, and there was this, I think it was just called a low hum. A low hum, one note, I think it was, something like that. And it was just a low sound, and it was at a frequency that I immediately went, and suddenly I was in this almost meditative state, and I went, I found my golden note right there, and I sat there for quite a while and just sort of, it was actually refreshing.
Have you been able to recreate that or go back?
Never.
Really?
Never. I haven't even.
Unfortunate.
In fact, I think I lost that video. I didn't even know where it went, but I found it once, and I enjoyed it.
Okay. Well, what sound do you hate?
The upstairs neighbors.
Okay, that's a very quick, easy one. What's your favorite curse word?
My curse word?
Favorite, yeah.
Well, my curse word, personally, my curse words are drat and cripes. But I think I've learned to appreciate the F word due to one of my characters in my book Fortress.
Oh, okay.
Whose favorite word is the F word.
Okay.
And
it's
he
funny how
uses it with such style.
Characters can cuss on their own terms, can't they?
Oh, yes. In fact, since I am mentally writing the end of the story, I know where all these characters end up. So as I got back into book 2, I realized that I'd lost the thread of this character. So I said, I've got to do something. So I wrote this little 2-page episode of this character as he was. And I think I used the F-bomb maybe 50 times.
In 2 pages.
But I had to get back into who he was at the time, and it worked.
If heaven exists, what would you want to hear when you approach the pearly gates?
Oh, goodness.
Directly stated to you.
I loved your books.